Talked about traumas. One of the traumas that I experienced was the murder by the police of one of our neighbors, James Calvin Brazier, known as Bubba Brazier. And that case has never been resolved. I mean, the FBI kind of botched their investigation. But here was a man who was a World War II veteran, Korean veteran, in the Navy, born in Dawson, went away, came back home with the family, a wife who was a hairdresser and a seamstress, basically a dress designer. And he was the first black person, to my knowledge, to get a VA loan as a black veteran. Built a new home, bought new cars, 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air, white and green. 1956, same color, 1957, 1958. And he was murdered by police in 1958.
Now, do you think that made him a target because he was so
absolutely
squared away and
absolutely
living a life that the dominant culture don't feel like he should be living?
Yes.
He wasn't like the regular folks?
That is true.
Okay.
He considered uppity. Now, the professionals, the teachers, the doctor and others, they expected them to be dressed a little different. But here was a guy who was, quote, a laborer, sharp, spit-shine shoes every day, casual clothes, and took good care of his family. I went back to an event regarding that murder, May of last year, 2023. And part of my presentation is that, you see the Jeffersons moving on up. For our hometown, hey, you could have beat that Brazier family,
Wow.
Because, like I said, he at times he worked 3 jobs to take care of his family. His wife had her own business. She sewed, she made clothes, she designed clothes. So just a sharp family, all the children were well taken care of. It was a different model because you still had people living on plantations that were sharecroppers. Basically, you had people who were just slavery by another name.
Yes.
So you had that dichotomy.
Yes.
And here's a person who's come back home setting a new standard because most people didn't buy new cars. He was buying a new car every year for 4 years straight.
I'm reminded again of the early part of the 20th century where you had some prominent black people around the country. You had your W.B. Du Boises, you had your Madam C.J. Walkers, right, and other people. But then you have other places in the country throughout the century who are what you just described. They're still in backwood areas of the country who, they're just getting by on what they can get by on, and they're just trying to survive, be it sharecropping or whatever.
Well, the thing is that it's by design. Not just remote areas of the country or backward areas of the country, in cities.
Yes, yes.
You have that.
Yes.
So again, it's about the thinking and about what we do. So if you understand the histories and treatment that we've been given, it's never been fair.
But
so what do you do about that?
Yes.
So do you participate in and accept the treatment, or do you work to make it better?
Yes. So for you, because this is the world through your lens, right? And experiencing all these things. You get out of high school, you already know what you want to do. You already know you want to be a pilot. Now you have this opportunity, right? So you're in training. What was it like for you, despite the resistance, if you will, from the people that you're relying on to get you through it, so to speak?
Well, let's back up. You know, once I joined the Army, because of what was on my contract, I wound up being in the infantry, not going to aviation flight school.
Okay.
So I became an infantryman. Airborne infantry was what was on the contract that I signed up to do. So I wound up going through basic leadership school, advanced infantry training, jump school, assigned to the 101st Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Now you were an enlisted man?
Enlisted man, yes.
Okay. Enlisted man.
And wound up being in a battalion with just a great command sergeant major, Herbert P. McCullough. I have to give him props because he was like a second father to me.
Okay.
I mean, he pushed me to do things that I didn't want to do. I mean, he wanted me to become a clerk typist. I resisted that. It's like, I'm not going to sit behind a typewriter typing. But I wound up, he wound up enrolling me in a class, and I took it, and then I became a male clerk. So, that paid off. And unfortunately, I wound up in a Jeep accident in March 5th, 1965. Was paralyzed for a while, fractured vertebrae, spinal shock, contusion, separated symphysis pubis, fractured pelvis.
Oh my goodness.
So, and when I finally got recovered and released, fellows who I was in the unit with, most of them were gone. And many of them had been sent to Vietnam with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and others had been sent to Fort Benning, Georgia with the 11th Air Assault Test. And a couple of months after I was released from the hospital, I wound up at Fort Benning in the 11th Air Assault Test.
So that wasn't the end of your military career?
No.
Oh, that's crazy.
I recovered because I was told that I'd never walk again. I had spinal shock from just from being thrown out of the Jeep on my back.
Yeah.
And the doctor said, well, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life. I'm 19 years old. It's like, you're not talking to me. So every day I would try to move my toes. And one day I was able to move my right toe, and the doc came and I said, hey, I can move my right toe. And he didn't believe it. He just jerked the cover off. So let me see. So from that point I was up doing physical therapy, occupational therapy. And it took a while for me to learn to walk again and all of that, but hey, I did it.
Wow,
and
that's amazing.
Yeah, and being an airborne soldier, a lot of times we used to get up, exercise every morning before breakfast, run 5 miles before 8 o'clock. So it's like I was working to get back in shape.
So you recover, and then you get sent off to the next duty station.
Yeah, Fort Benning.
Fort Benning.
11th Air Assault Test then turned into the 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Air Cavalry Division, deployed to Vietnam in late '65. So
did you know beforehand, or did you just have that? Did you consign yourself to say, well, yes, because the rumblings of Vietnam was happening at that point, right? I mean,
it was not rumblings; it was actual, fighting during that time.
Yeah. So you knew you were going.
Well, I knew that was a possibility, and then when I got released from the hospital, and my buddies, a lot of were in Vietnam, and then I was eventually transferred to a unit that I'm thinking, oh, well, this is a whole division that's going to be going. So I knew it. Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is that even once I got to my first duty assignment, I applied to flight school several times. I just kept applying. It's like, that's what I wanted to do.
What was the criteria at that point for even getting in for an enlisted person? Because I know it's a little different if you're a civilian trying to get in, but for someone already in the military and in a different MOS, a different field.
Well, they had the criteria. You had to have a certain score on your Armed Forces qualification test. So, I met that criteria. I passed the physicals. So, so the mental aptitude and the fight physical, and then you had to go on these orientation flights. So they would take you up and see if you got airsick or, gave you the controls.
Were recommendations from superiors necessary as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
But my applications got lost a lot.
See, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, they got lost. and I even when I was deployed to Vietnam with the 1st Cavalry Division, I applied again. Got the recommendation of several of the leaders, my battalion commander, Kenneth Martell. He said, well, before I recommend you, I want you to fly with my pilot. So I flew with his pilot, you know, in his command helicopter, and pilot gave me the controls. And so, hey, do this, do that. And so got a recommendation from him. And actually, I was accepted to flight school, but the division didn't tell me. Because in Vietnam, 1st Cav Division, with the casualties they were receiving, unless you were KIA, severely wounded, or severely sick, you weren't leaving that division.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was the division you were a part of?
Yeah. That was my first tour in Vietnam, was the 1st Cav Division.
So you were still infantry at the time?
Oh, yeah, yes. Yeah.
If you care to, won't you give me some of the highlights, for lack of a better word, things that you remember during that period, and how long were you there for?
First tour in Vietnam was a little over 10 months. And because I was going to be discharged in July, I got discharged in June. So I was in Vietnam for 10 months. Highlights, you know, we were on the USNS Geiger for 30 days in transit from Savannah, Georgia to Quy Nhon, Vietnam, with stops in Hawaii and Guam. Then got on board a helicopter in Quy Nhon and flew into what is now what's called the golf course, and then walked to our battalion area, pitched a tent, and it was just nonstop activity. In fact, first night we were there, you know, you got put out on watch. So it was just nonstop activity every day. So either I was in a Jeep doing something, and I had, during the transit to Vietnam, I was moved from an infantry line unit to headquarters. And I had been a point man, so I would, you know, I felt I had abandoned my buddies. So I would go down and go on patrol with them until the sergeant major found out about it and put a stop to that. Because, you know, it's like, I'm up sitting behind a typewriter, and, you know, and my buddies are out there in the field. So that, you know, I didn't want them to think that I had abandoned them. And I just, you know, being a Remington Ranger is what we called it, you know, was just not something I wanted to do as a young man. But so, but then I wound up getting assigned to be a field mail clerk, because the mail clerk that we had, that were guys who'd been on a mission for about 4 weeks, came back, they wanted their mail, and he told them that he was closed. Yes. These guys locked and loaded on, they were ready to kill him.
Oh my goodness. So,
you know, that got interventions.
We got to replace you.
Well, no, you know, I wound up being assigned as a field mail clerk, so no matter where the units were, and if we were deployed as the whole battalion, I was in the field every day. Wherever the troops were, I was there, getting mail, taking correspondence, and that sort of thing. And again, you know, yeah, it was, you know, that there's nothing glorious or glorifiable about war.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a quote from George Forrest, who was in the Ia Drang Valley battle, and you know, war's business. Yeah.
You get the call.
Yeah, I get the call. Mrs. Archer, you know, she was kind of our dorm mother. I walk in, Mrs. Archer gives me the number, directs me to a phone. I call, and they want to know if I'm still interested in flight school. I said, yes. And they said, well, finish your semester, but you need a new flight physical. I said, well, hey, let's schedule a flight physical now, because I need to know whether I'm, you know, still meet the physical requirements to go to flight school. And I finished the first semester, and I re-enlisted specifically for Fort Campbell again. Herbert P. McCullough was there. It's like, so I enlisted for Fort Campbell, and he gave me a number to call to come to his unit. I went there, and then at the end of the day, he drove me to the headquarters, and I was assigned to his unit. And me being a clerk typist came in handy because they were 3 years behind on suspense dates in this unit.
Wow.
You know, and so you had a lot of guys who just, you know, who were just war weary. You know, some guys were strung out on drugs. And so I told you know, Sergeant Major McCullough, I said, hey, tell you what. And we had what I considered a weak company commander. You know, he was trying to bargain with guys rather than lead.
Mm-hmm.
Said, hey, why don't you give me a key to the headquarters? I will, I'll come to the headquarters early, and I'll go do breakfast. But that's what I need to do. If y'all are 3 years behind, I'll catch you up. So, in about 2 months, you know, that was my gig.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd get up at about 6, go to the headquarters, work until about 8, go have breakfast, come back, and work sometime to, you know, 10 o'clock at night. Because, you know, I had something to do that occupied my time, and I wasn't around the guys who were disgruntled and, you know, some doing crazy stuff. It's like, no, let me just do this work. And then I went off to flight school.